For more than 2 weeks, the young men who went to Horn Island with Nolan Wells said nothing in public while the internet decided they were guilty. That silence has ended. Warren Hudson, 18 years old, who calls Nolan his best friend, and whose name has appeared in more online accusations than anyone else connected to this case, sat down and gave his account of the 4th of July from beginning to end. He says the boat was sinking. He says that is why they left. He says Nolan was asked to get on that boat more than once and said no. Now, an account is not evidence. Hudson gave this interview to a conservative commentator, not to investigators, and every word of it is his version of events, offered by a young man with an obvious reason to defend himself. But here is what makes it worth your time. Parts of his story can be checked against the state of Mississippi's own GPS records, against a photograph's metadata, against timestamps his own accusers have been citing for 2 weeks. So that is what this video does. Hudson's account, laid line by line against the verified record, where it matches exactly, where it explains something nobody could explain before, and where it runs directly into the account Nolan's family has been telling the country. Because one part of what he says collides head-on with the young woman at the center of this case. And they cannot both be right. Before we dive into this, do 3 quick things. Like this video, subscribe, and drop the location and the time you are watching from in the comments. It costs you nothing, and it tells us how far Nolan's story is actually reaching. Now, who is speaking here? Because that matters as much as what he says. Warren Hudson is 18. He told his interviewer he became close with Nolan in the 8th grade, when the two of them ate lunch together every week, and he described their friend group as tight-knit. He also acknowledged something honest and slightly awkward. He never really got to know Nolan's parents. He says it did not change the friendship. He is also the young man that a large portion of the internet has spent nearly 3 weeks accusing of killing his friend. That is not an exaggeration, and it is the reason this interview exists. Speaking to the New York Post before the sit-down, Hudson said, "It is a sick world we are living in. It is terrible," he said. "Nolan was my best friend. There are no facts out, just a lot of rumors." And there is one more fact about Warren Hudson that belongs on the table immediately, because it connects to a thread this case has been pulling since the first week. His mother is Ashlee Cole, a Chancery Court judge in Jackson County, Mississippi, the same sitting judge who published a public statement on the 7th of July defending her son, describing the boat's bilge pump failure, stating that Nolan made a decision to stay on the island and return with another group later, and saying her son cooperated fully with investigators. She also said she knew Nolan's mother, Christine, and had graduated from the same high school, and she pushed back on claims that her family was trying to hamper the investigation to protect her son and understand what has been aimed at him in the meantime, because it is the backdrop to every word of this interview. This is the same case in which the FBI has confirmed it is working to address interstate threats made against individuals connected to the investigation. It is the case in which a sitting judge said publicly that she fears for her children's safety. Warren Hudson is one of the people on the receiving end of that. Whatever you conclude about his account, he is a teenager who lost a friend and then spent 3 weeks watching strangers on the internet call him a killer. So here is the full disclosure, stated plainly before anything else. Warren Hudson has not been charged with any crime. He has not been named a suspect by any agency. No official in this case has accused him of anything at all. He is a legally innocent teenager who is the son of a local judge, and both of those facts should shape how you weigh everything you are about to hear in both directions. One quick thing before we go further. Most dangerous people do not look dangerous. They look like good husbands, trusted co-workers, devoted fathers, loyal friends. The faces nobody thinks twice about. By the time anyone realizes something is wrong, they are looking backward at warning signs that suddenly seem obvious. Awareness almost always comes too late. That is exactly why I wrote my book, How to Spot Dangerous People Before They Hurt You. Not to teach fear, but to teach recognition. Inside it, you will learn how criminals actually think, the warning signs they give long before they act, and the behaviors that could save your life or the life of someone you love. If understanding those patterns could one day protect you or someone close to you, the link is in the description. Read it before you ever need it, not after. Now, how to weigh an interview like this one. The interview was conducted by Brandon Tatum, a conservative political commentator who goes by the Officer Tatum, and it was released in parts across his channel over several days. That is not a neutral newsroom, and this channel is going to say so plainly, for one specific reason. We applied exactly the same standard to the other side. When Ben Crump stood at a podium in Chicago and read Nolan's independent autopsy aloud, this channel noted that Crump is an advocate, that his job is representing a family rather than reporting facts, and that his own certainty about a piece of audio evidence had shifted between interviews. That was not hostility toward the family. It was discipline, and the same discipline applies here. So apply it evenly. One side of this case has a civil rights attorney with a national platform. The other side now has a conservative commentator with a national platform. Both are advocacy. Neither is investigation. The useful work, the work almost nobody is doing, is taking the claims from both platforms and checking them against records that belong to neither side. That is the second half of this video. First, his account. Hudson describes the 4th of July as an ordinary big day on the water. The group went out around 10 in the morning. Nolan rowed out on a Triton, a bay boat owned by one of Hudson's close friends, a young man this channel will not name, because unlike Hudson, he has not spoken publicly and has not been charged with anything. A second boat, a Palm Beach 18, carried 4 more. A third, a Tide Line, carried somewhere between 10 and 16 people. Multiple boats, one group of friends, and the island itself was packed. Hudson described thousands of people on Horn Island that day, with boats lining the shore for what he called miles. He said Nolan appeared completely fine, drinking with the larger group, moving between people, nothing out of the ordinary. Then, at some point in the afternoon, a girl came up to Hudson and told him his brother had just gotten into a fight. This is where his account runs straight into one of the most viral claims in this entire case, the claim that Nolan Wells was in a physical altercation on that beach. Hudson says he put his drink down and ran. When he got there, someone was being pulled away, and his younger brother told him what had happened. Another young man had punched him in the face, he had punched back, they had gone to the ground, and his brother had put the other person in an armbar. Hudson describes a crowd of younger guys, his brother's age. Then his interviewer asked the question that matters. Was Nolan involved in any of this? Absolutely not, Hudson said. He says Nolan was not there, that he never saw him anywhere near it, and that the people involved were a different, younger group entirely. He says he pulled his brother off the beach, told him to get in the water and cool down, and that was the end of it. Now hold that against everything else on the record, because this is the third different account the public has been given of a fight on that island. Weeks ago, a viral video circulated that many people believed showed Nolan arguing shortly before he disappeared. Ben Crump described audio in which a voice he attributed to Nolan protested about his phone. Then Tracestin Shepard, another of Nolan's longtime friends, told ABC News that the voice in that clip was his own, not Nolan's, and that the confrontation was his, involving a stranger, with no phone involved. Now Hudson describes a separate fight involving his younger brother, also not Nolan. 3 descriptions. 2 of them, from 2 different friends, say the same thing: whatever happened on that beach, it was not Nolan Wells. And 1 piece of official corroboration sits underneath all of it. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office itself publicly requested photos and videos from the island that day, specifically including footage depicting alleged altercations. Investigators do not ask for that if nothing happened. What no one outside the investigation can say is whose altercation it was, or whether it has anything to do with how Nolan died. What Hudson's account does add is a reason the group's attention was somewhere else that afternoon, because of what he says he found when he got back to the boat. The Triton was taking on water. This is the part that answers the question in the title of this video, so listen for the detail, because detail is what makes an account checkable. Hudson describes roughly 6 inches of water standing in the boat up to the transom. He says he opened the starboard side hatch and found the battery completely submerged. The motor would not stay trimmed down. His friend would trim it from the console, and it would come right back up. The bilge pump, whose entire job is to push water out of a hole, was clearing nothing. He says he looked over the gunnel at the bilge outlet and found it sitting level with the water line. Water coming in, nothing going out. His explanation for how it happened is mundane and, to anyone who has spent time on a boat, entirely plausible. Too many people getting on and off, too much weight, over too many hours. Dragging water in over the sides until the hull was carrying a load it could not shed. He describes what followed as chaos. The boat's owner jumping into the water to set a rear anchor. Another friend digging trash out of the bilge to try to get the pump working. Hudson yelling at people to calm down while telling them the boat could sink. And a friend on the tide line eventually deciding to tow them out, away from the crowd and the shallows, so they could work the problem. That tow, he says, began at 4:30 in the afternoon, which brings the account to its hardest moment and the reason Warren Hudson agreed to talk at all. The last time he saw Nolan Wells, by his own telling, was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Nolan was on the sand with the young woman he had spent most of the day with. Hudson describes glancing over, seeing Nolan shaking his head and laughing, and calling out something teasing to him. That was it. That was the last time he laid eyes on his friend. Then came the leaving. And his version of it is specific. He says that when the group was ready to go. One of his friends called out to Nolan repeatedly to get on the boat. He describes the man as panicking, shouting a version of "Get on the boat, we are leaving, the boat is having issues." He says it was not asked once, it was asked multiple times. "Nolan, get on the boat. If you are coming, you need to come now." And he says Nolan answered, "No, I am staying out here. I am going to ride in with somebody else." Hudson then makes an argument that deserves to be heard on its own terms, because it is the core of the friend's entire defense. He says riding out to Horn Island with one group and riding back with another is completely ordinary on that stretch of coast. He says he has done it himself many times. He says Nolan was not even the only person in their own group who rode out with them and returned on someone else's boat that day. He says he could name 50 people who did the same thing that same afternoon. So it is not like we just left him there, he said. Nolan made a decision to stay on the island after my friends asked him multiple times, and he decided to stay. Then Hudson made the claim that has traveled furthest, and the one this case may eventually turn on. He says the young woman Nolan was with sent a text message to one of his friends the following day. And he says that in it, she wrote that the last time she saw Nolan was when that friend was yelling at him to get on the boat, and that she was standing right there and watched Nolan decide not to go. Hudson says he has a picture of that message. Understand exactly what that claim does, because it is the most consequential sentence in the entire interview. For 2 weeks, the central contradiction of this case has been between two accounts of Nolan's final decision. The friends have said he chose to stay. Ben Crump, speaking for Nolan's family, has said the young woman's account is specific, that it has not wavered, and that she says Nolan told her he was going back to get on his friend's boat before it left. If Hudson's description of that text is accurate, then the young woman's own words, sent the day after Nolan disappeared, would support the friend's version rather than contradict it. And if it is not accurate, or is missing context, then it is a claim about a teenage girl's private message, described publicly by someone with an interest in the outcome. This channel has not seen that message. No news organization has published it. No investigator has confirmed that it exists or what it says. Her family's public statement, issued weeks ago, described her leaving the island safely on another boat and having no knowledge of what happened to Nolan afterward. It did not describe watching him refuse to board. So the honest status of this claim is simple, unverified, enormously significant if true, and exactly the kind of evidence a grand jury can test and the internet cannot. One pause. For him, underneath the competing accounts and the platforms and the lawyers is an 18-year-old who did not come home. So write his name in the comments plainly, with respect. Nolan Wells. Let the record under this video be about a person rather than an argument. Now the part nobody else is doing, checking this account against records that belong to no one in it. Start with the timestamp, because it is the strongest single piece of corroboration in the entire interview. Warren Hudson says the boat left Horn Island at 4:30 in the afternoon. He says it twice, unprompted, while describing the tow. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources tracked that vessel electronically that day, and CBS News obtained the data. According to that record, the boat departed Horn Island at 4:31 in the afternoon. 1 minute. A young man recalling a chaotic day from memory, weeks later, on a talk show, landing within 60 seconds of a GPS log he had no part in creating. That does not make everything else he said true. A departure time is a fact he would have reason to remember, and one his mother had already stated publicly. But it is a real, checkable point of contact between his story and a machine record, and in a case this saturated with invention, that counts for something. Now the more interesting one. The GPS data did not just record the departure, it recorded 4 separate movements afterward, and one of them has been treated online as deeply suspicious for 2 weeks. After returning toward the dock, the boat traveled into Fort Bayou at 5:52 in the evening, then went back to the dock at 6:06, a boat making an unexplained detour into a bayou, hours after leaving behind the young man who never came home. Countless videos have made that stop sound sinister. Hudson explains it, and the explanation is almost aggressively boring. He says that once they had been towed clear and the motor would finally stay trimmed down, the boat's owner pulled the drain plug. That is a standard trick. With the plug out and the boat up on plane at speed, water standing inside the hull drains out the back as you run. He describes moving everyone's weight forward to get the boat to plane, running at roughly 40 miles an hour, and watching the water empty out. But you cannot leave the plug out. So, he says, they ran into Fort Bayou and stopped for one reason, so the owner could jump in and put the plug back in the boat. Then they docked it. Check that against the log. Fort Bayou at 5:52. Back at the dock by 6:06. 14 minutes. That is about how long it takes to stop, put someone over the side, reseat a drain plug, and move on. His account does not merely coexist with the GPS record. It explains the part of that record people found most suspicious, and it explains it with a detail so specific and so unglamorous that it is hard to see why anyone would invent it. Keep going, because the corroboration does not stop at the boat. Hudson says he called Nolan's mother at about 11 o'clock that night. Christine Wansley has told the public, repeatedly and from the very beginning, that the call that broke her night open came in at 7 minutes past 11, and that the name on her screen was one of Nolan's friends, rather than Nolan himself. Two people on opposite sides of a national argument, describing the same phone call within minutes of each other. Hudson's description of what he did before and after that call also matches the shape of the night as it has been reported. He says he had noticed Nolan was not around, that he texted several friends asking whether Nolan had ridden in with any of them, that all of them said no, and that he then asked another friend for Christine's number. He says he told her not to panic and that he was going to call the Coast Guard. He says he stayed on the phone with the Coast Guard for around 20 minutes, giving a description of Nolan, what he was wearing, the last place they had been, the last time he had seen him, who he was with, which boat they were on, and the water conditions. Independent reporting has consistently stated that one of Nolan's friends contacted the Coast Guard that night. Hudson is saying he was that friend, and his account of the sequence fits. His reasoning for making the call is worth quoting, because it is the least defensive thing he says in the entire interview. "My friends and I have been on the water our whole life," he said. "Stuff happens. People die all the time. I know people who have died out there. It is a fun place to be, but it is also very dangerous if you are not handling it right." He said he would rather call the Coast Guard 100 times and lose his mind over it and have his friend be okay than not call and not know. Then the photograph. You may remember the image that convinced a large part of the internet that Nolan had been alive after the 4th of July, a picture of him at a pool party, circulated after his body was found, which spread with the claim that it proved the timeline was wrong. For a short and painful stretch, strangers shared it, hoping it meant this story was not what it was. Rolling Stone settled it using the one thing that does not misremember: the image metadata. The photograph was taken on the 27th of June, a full week before Horn Island, and simply uploaded on the 5th of July, which is what created the confusion. Hudson, asked about that picture directly, gives the same date without hesitation: the 27th of June. He describes where it was taken, at a friend's place in Pass Christian, and notes that his own arm is around Nolan in the frame, a young man's memory matching forensic image data he did not generate. That is another point of contact. Then the phones. which is the detail the family has never been able to accept. Hudson says nobody takes a phone off the boat at Horn Island. People go out there to get away from their phones. You are waist deep in murky water. He says he has never once seen someone standing in that water, scrolling on a phone, and that if someone does use a phone, they use it quickly and put it straight back on the boat. He notes that this is why so many of the pictures people have seen from that day were taken on boats. That matches what has already been reported from another direction. Tracestin Shepard told ABC News that Nolan's phone was left aboard along with many others because the group was spending so much time in the water, and Shepard's uncle, who piloted one of the boats that day, confirmed to ABC that this is ordinary practice on the water. Two friends and one adult, independently, describing the same custom. And finally, the boat trouble itself, which is now corroborated from three separate directions that do not depend on Hudson at all. His mother, Judge Ashlee Cole, described a bilge pump failure in her public statement on the 7th of July. Tracestin Shepard told ABC News the group was told the boat needed to return to shore because of an electrical issue. Other reporting relayed accounts of the boat taking on water. For weeks, those descriptions looked like inconsistencies. Hudson's account reconciles all three at once, because in his telling they are the same event. The boat took on water. The water submerged the battery. A submerged battery is an electrical failure, and the bilge pump, the system meant to prevent exactly this, was clogged and sitting at the waterline, unable to clear anything. One malfunction. Three true descriptions of it, and on top of that sits the audio that was released alongside the GPS data, capturing the group calling for help on the water as the boat struggled. So take stock honestly. On the departure time, the Fort Bayou stop, the 11 o'clock call, the Coast Guard report, the photograph date, the phone custom, and the boat failure, Warren Hudson's account either matches independent records or is corroborated by people with no reason to help him. That, it is a substantial amount of verification for a single interview. And it is exactly why the next section matters, because verification of the checkable parts is not the same thing as proof of the unverifiable ones. Here is what Hudson's account does not resolve. It does not explain the phone. Nolan's family has never disputed that phones stay on boats. What Christine Wansley has said, over and over, is that her son knew he was staying behind on an island with no facilities, no shelter, and no way to call anyone, and that an 18-year-old in that position asks for his phone before the boat pulls away. "Give me my phone," she has said. "Give me my keys." The friend's account has a young man declining a ride home and simultaneously letting his only means of communication leave without him. Hudson's version explains why the phone was on the boat in the first place. It does not explain why it stayed there. It does not explain the deletions. The family has alleged that Snapchat content and text messages were removed from that phone before it reached them, an allegation no agency has confirmed and no one has been accused of by any authority. Hudson was asked about it directly at the start of the interview segment, and the portion available to this channel moves to other subjects before he answers in detail. It does not identify the ride. The entire friend's account rests on Nolan having arranged to return with someone else. Nearly 3 weeks later, no such person, boat, or arrangement has surfaced publicly. Hudson's answer is that this is normal, that people do it constantly, and that others in his own group did exactly that. Fair enough, but normal is not the same as confirmed, and a duty of care question in front of a grand jury will turn on precisely that difference, whether Nolan was handed to a real ride or left to one everyone assumed existed. And it does not answer the 90 minutes. The last confirmed sighting of Nolan is around 3 in the afternoon. The boat left at 4:31. Hudson's account fills part of that window with the fight and the sinking boat, which is genuinely new. But it fills it from the perspective of a group whose attention, by their own description, was entirely on a vessel taking on water. Where Nolan was, and what he was doing, in that stretch is still unaccounted for by anyone. There is one more exchange in that interview that has to be included, because it goes to the argument the family has placed at the center of this case. Hudson was asked directly whether he believes race has anything to do with any of this. His answer was immediate. Of course not. He argued that if Nolan had ever felt the slightest bit uncomfortable around them, he would not have spent his time with them, and he pointed to years of photographs of Nolan across his friends' social media accounts going back to their freshman year of high school. "Every time we are back from college," he said, "we hang out." He said he would never look at Nolan any differently than any of his other friends, and returned again to the phrase he used throughout: "He was like a brother to me." That is his position, and it is reported here as his. The family's position is different, and it has been stated just as plainly. Nolan was the only black person in that group, and video from the island showed a largely white crowd. The Associated Press has reported that the family's distrust is deepened by Mississippi's long legacy of racism. Ben Crump has argued explicitly that if the roles had been reversed, the investigation would have looked different from the first hour. And the NAACP has adopted a resolution calling on local, state, and federal authorities, including the United States Department of Justice, to conduct a thorough and transparent investigation. Both positions are now on the record. Neither one is evidence of how Nolan Wells died, but the gap between them is a real part of why this case will not quiet down, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest reporting. Most importantly, none of it addresses the medical evidence, because Hudson's interview and the independent autopsy landed within a day of each other. On the 22nd of July, one day after Hudson's interview began appearing publicly, Ben Crump stood at the NAACP National Convention in Chicago and released the preliminary findings of the second autopsy performed on Nolan's body. Dr. Roger A. Mitchell Jr., a board-certified forensic pathologist and the former chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C., ruled the cause and manner of death undetermined, pending investigation. He performed dissections the first autopsy had not, looking specifically for hidden trauma, and found no fractures, no deep tissue injuries, and no lacerations. He did find an area of red discoloration deep in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head, over the occipital bone, and he wrote that its cause is unclear and the finding inconclusive for injury around the time of death, while flagging it as significant enough to warrant further investigation. He also noted that parts of Nolan's neck had been retained by the state and were not sent with the body, calling that a common forensic practice, but adding that without them he could not rule out injury to the neck. And he wrote the sentence that has defined the coverage since, that he cannot rule out whether any intervening, non-accidental factors contributed to or caused the death. Set that beside Hudson's interview and you see the actual shape of this case. A pathologist who cannot rule out that something happened. A group of friends whose account of the afternoon is, in its checkable parts, holding up against machine records. Neither of those cancels the other. The autopsy did not accuse anyone. The corroborated timestamps do not prove what happened to Nolan after that boat left. There is one more development, and it is the closest thing in this cycle to an actual legal turn. On the 20th of July, the day of her son's funeral, Christine Wansley signed a petition to open Nolan's estate and to serve as its administratrix. It was filed the same day in Jackson County Chancery Court, and the petition describes the estate's assets in a way that tells you exactly what it is for, consisting solely of claims for damages resulting from the circumstances surrounding his death. In plain language, that is the procedural groundwork for a wrongful death lawsuit. An estate has to exist before it can sue on a deceased person's behalf. It is not a lawsuit, it names no defendant, and it accuses no one of anything. It is a legal container being built, quietly, while everything else plays out. And it matters, because of a distinction legal analysts have been raising since the first week of this case. A criminal case and a civil case are held to different standards. A grand jury weighing charges asks whether there is probable cause to believe a crime occurred. A civil court asks a much lower question, whether it is more likely than not that someone's negligence contributed to a death. Conduct that never produces a criminal charge can still produce civil liability, which means that even if the grand jury returns nothing, the questions in this case may not close. They may simply move to a different courtroom with a different burden of proof, where duty of care is argued rather than assumed, and where a phone's chain of custody stops being an internet talking point and becomes an exhibit. And there is one thing in Hudson's account that quietly deepens the mystery rather than resolving it. He estimates thousands of people were on Horn Island that day, with boats lining the shore for miles. Tracestin Shepard put the number on their particular stretch of beach at around 300. Christine Wansley has raised the same point from the opposite direction, asking how 300 to 400 people could be out there and nobody can say anything about what happened to her son. Put those together. By the friend's own testimony, Nolan Wells was left on an island crowded with witnesses, and nearly 3 weeks later, there is still no public account from a single one of them describing Nolan Wells after roughly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Not a sighting, not a conversation, not a photograph. That silence is the thing the crowd was supposed to make impossible. And it is the reason the sheriff's office keeps asking the public for original, unedited photos and videos from that day. Somewhere in a stranger's camera roll, timestamped by clocks nobody can argue with, there may be frames that answer this. As of this recording, none have surfaced publicly. So where does everything stand as of this recording? The independent autopsy is complete and preliminary, with cause and manner undetermined and 7 questions the pathologist says remain unanswered. The state's autopsy is finished, but unreleased, still waiting on toxicology, and the Jackson County coroner has confirmed it is not yet complete. The sheriff's office is leading the investigation, has interviewed dozens of witnesses, and is being assisted by the FBI on digital evidence and on interstate threats against people connected to the case. The district attorney has committed to presenting the completed file to a grand jury. An estate has been opened, and no one at any point has been charged with anything or publicly named a suspect, which brings this back to the promise in the title and to what the GPS data actually confirms. It confirms that the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 in the afternoon, within 1 minute of what Warren Hudson said from memory. It confirms the stop in Fort Bayou that his account explains as a drain plug being reseated. It confirms movements that, taken together with a released distress recording and 3 separate descriptions of the same mechanical failure, describe a group of teenagers dealing with a boat that was filling with water. Here is what it does not confirm, and this is the line that separates careful reporting from everything else. It does not confirm what Nolan Wells said before that boat pulled away. It does not confirm whether he was handed to a ride home or left to one that was only assumed. It does not confirm what happened to him in the hours after, on an island where, by Hudson's own estimate, thousands of people were standing. And it cannot explain why a pathologist found an unexplained mark on the back of his head. 2 families are now living inside that gap. One buried a son and has been told by their own pathologist that foul play cannot be ruled out. The other has a teenage son who has been accused by strangers, on the internet, of a killing that no investigator has said occurred. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. That is the hardest fact in this entire case, and it is the one almost nobody wants to sit with, because it offers no villain and no resolution, only a process that has not finished. What Warren Hudson's interview genuinely changed is narrower than his supporters claim, and more significant than his critics will admit. It put a first-person account on the record where there had been silence. Several parts of it check out against evidence he did not control, and it left the central questions of this case exactly where they were. The answers are not going to come from a podium in Chicago or a commentator's channel. They are going to come from a sealed autopsy, a phone that has not yet been examined jointly, a toxicology report that has not been returned, and a room in Jackson County where 15 to 25 citizens will finally hear all of it at once. When those things land, the verified breakdown will be here, and nothing before it is confirmed. No leaks dressed as facts. No accusations aimed at people no authority has charged. If that is how you want this case covered, subscribe and turn on notifications. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old, a graduate of Ocean Springs High School, a rising sophomore wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, days away from reporting back for his season. He went out on the water on a holiday with people he had known since middle school, and he did not come back. The young man who says he was Nolan's best friend spent an hour describing a day at the beach and a boat full of water. Nolan's mother has spent nearly 3 weeks asking a simpler question, and she has never once changed it. She has not asked for a conviction. She has not named anyone. She asked investigators to treat her son's case as if he were their own child. That is still the only thing she is asking for. Nolan Wells. Say his name, and stay with this until there is a real answer.